Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 127, Ghostly Characters. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the movie The Haunted Mansion, the 2023 version. How you doing today, Mike?
I'm good. I think this one's just called Haunted Mansion. It doesn't have the, so it's a totally different movie.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It's action. Okay. We're talking about Haunted Mansion. Anyway, yes, right. Haunted Mansion.
But yes, I am doing today. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. What's new in your writing world?
Oh, it's just crawling along. I'm still working on the Tales of Zara. I think I've come up with how book 3 will end. I have an idea for the climax and for the resolution, and how book 4 will begin and end. At least the resolution of the book 4, not necessarily the climactic scene, although I have some ideas about it. And then I have most of the main steps, I think, in book 3 and some of them in book 4. So it's moving along, but I'm still, in the ideation phase, right? I'm still trying to figure out, where does this story go and how does it get there over the next 2 books. So I'm trying to outline book 3 mostly, and at the same time, at least have a high level of book 4, so I'm getting there. I've got some of the key points. There are scenes that are in my head, which is always a good sign when I can start thinking about, specifics and what characters are saying and doing. So yeah, it's moving forward, just, very slowly.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh, no forward momentum at all. Life is just really very demanding right now. So it's unfortunately has to put that on the back burner while I manage some other things, but that's okay.
Yep, that's how it goes.
Yeah. So have you encountered any interesting books, movies, or TV lately?
Not in the last week. Not really. I've just been reading one of the books we're going to talk about later. But yeah, nothing new. Nothing too exciting.
And I'm doing the same, reading one of the books we're going to talk about later, and still working through the 4th book of the Stormlight Archive. And now that it's October, of course, I'm getting ready to watch more spooky stuff. So that's been kind of fun. That's when I can usually get an hour a day to watch something, and that's kind of nice.
Good.
Yeah. Are you ready to talk about Haunted Mansion?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Today we're talking about the story told in the movie Haunted Mansion from 2023, and I will read the synopsis that comes up under IMDb. A single mom named Gabby hires a tour guide, a psychic, a priest, and a historian to help exorcise her newly bought mansion after discovering it is inhabited by ghosts. Did you like this movie?
Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. It's interesting to see it right after the previous one. It's a little bit different in tone and style, but I thought it was still enjoyable. I thought they had some good fun stuff in here, some good moments. I liked right near the beginning when the woman and her son go into the house, and then she sees the suit of armor And she's like, nope, we're out of here. We're done. And then we see them again later, which in the house, which opens the mystery of why did they come back, which we quickly learn. So they had some new things, right, where the ghosts can follow them around. They become attached to them, which I thought was interesting and made sense in the context of the story and what the villain is doing in the story, and allows us to sort of attach these other characters into the house. This random group of people who got sucked in there and can't leave now. I thought that was a very fun, clever idea. I also liked the call to the refusal to the call to adventure is a writing thing about a lot of hero stories, like the hero's journey, where in this one the hero, I think his name's Ben, I might have that wrong, gets asked the question, do you want to be a hero? And he says no. Because there's usually the refusal that you get in movies, but it's not so obvious as that. But I thought that was funny. A little bit of meta writing there. And I love that he's walking around supposedly taking pictures with his camera, just making the shutter sound. I thought that was great. So some fun things like that kind of got me into the movie early and put me in the right mindset for this, and made me think, oh, this might be good, because I was afraid it was just going to be either just another version of what we got, like kind of the same kind of thing of the first one, or it was going to completely fail. But it ended up kind of doing its own thing, and I think for the most part it did it pretty well. And they did some interesting things with backstory in this one, which I think was something that was missing from the previous movie a bit. They did a good job. Well, an interesting job. I don't know. I'll have to see if you think it was good or not. But I thought it was kind of interesting, where we get the backstory of this Alistair Crump, who was, the bad guy, by having the characters learn about it, because they don't know what's going on. So they go and they get sort of a history lesson on it, and then it's explained in voiceover, which ordinarily would be a terrible way to do it. But we get sort of a montage of what is being discussed in that voiceover, and I thought it was kind of interesting because the characters are learning about this, and we get to see it visually. So I thought that worked pretty well for me, and they didn't dwell on it too much. They got us the info and then moved on with the characters in the present day. So for me, that worked pretty well. I also liked the idea that there was a ghost that the ghosts were afraid of. I thought that was fun. It reminded me of the movie Frighteners from back in the day with Michael J. Fox, if you ever saw that.
No.
Oh, we should discuss that one. We should put that on our list. Maybe that'll
right.
be next October. We'll do it as a Halloween thing.
Okay.
I also liked that we get character growth, not just from our main protagonist, but some of the other characters as well, right? We get to see the spiritualist step up and believe in herself that she can do this thing. The con man guy and Owen Wilson learning to take his role seriously, getting his own faith, as it were. The son also deals with his grief. So the other characters go too. They're not just little bit players there for humor. They do actually have a part, and they do grow. So I thought that was really good. And something I wanted to mention from the previous movie, which we discussed last week, we talked about what could be improved. And I had one or two things, and you had some things. And then as I was thinking about it later that day, some more, I realized there were a number of other things that I thought I would have changed in that first movie. Most of it came down to world building, right? Like and rules to the magic. Like if the curse was clear, why were those carved heads still singing in their car at the end of the movie?
I think you did mention that last week.
Yeah, I mentioned something about that. Like that was one. The crystal ball, like who was that crystal ball woman? Why was she doing there? Why was she there afterward? Like that wasn't really explained very well in that movie. The grandfather who built the place, like I would have mentioned that he was into occult magic or something, because like why was this curse there and attached to this whole place? Presumably the grandfather, if he had built this mansion and when he and his next two generations died, presumably the house would have been empty, but there were a ton of graves on the grounds for some reason. Who were those people? So there's a lot of like this weird world building stuff that, as I thought about it more, didn't really make much sense, which, for the most part was fine in the movie. You're not really supposed to be taking that too seriously, I think. But I do think they addressed a lot of those elements for this movie a little bit better, right? We get a lot more backstory, reasons for things. Who is the crystal ball woman? We know who she is. We learn that story. And we get to see her as a character, and we get to see her in the crystal ball. And that kind of becomes her own world. And I think they blended elements from the ride into this movie better than the first one. They weren't just things that he walked by in a hall.
Yeah.
They were, you kind of get little bits of them as we go. I thought they did that better in this one. I think that was something that you had mentioned last time they could have done better.
Yeah.
So for me, I think they did that better. I think also they did a better resolution on this movie than the original. The original just kind of ended and they're driving away in the car.
Yeah.
Here we get to see the characters in their new state, which is always something I enjoy. The new state of the house, the new state of the characters, how the characters have grown and how it changed them. And we get to see them be together again. So I thought all that worked out better. So yeah, I think overall I enjoyed this movie. What do you think?
This is going to be one of those rare cases where we're going to be disagreeing, because I did not enjoy this movie. And I think you make really good points about where the movie was strong. And I think the movie was strong in that it had a cohesive plot. And the plot kind of held together. And I think that, you're exactly right there. And I will tell you this, I absolutely loved the beginning of this movie. I was actually very excited when the movie started. And I saw the opening about how New Orleans supernatural culture blends and overlaps and weaves life and death. And I think there was something at the beginning that says something about how, there's sadness and joy at the same time. And so I was expecting that to set the tone for the story, and it really didn't. I mean, yeah, you're right. At the end, we got to see the characters that move on after their adventure, and I suppose you could say that's where the joy was, after the fear and the sadness. But it was so muted that to me, it didn't feel connected to that really dynamic, vibrant beginning. It kind of was like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to settle in and watch something that's layered and textured and has these interesting concepts built into this story. And then it sort of just fell apart after that. I think they tried. I really think they did try, but I think that they made some missteps with regard to character. And so what happened then was a really plot-driven story that made it difficult for me to connect with the characters. So I don't know if we want to go on to that now, or if you wanted to respond to my thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think so. Overall, I like this movie, but I agree with you in the sense that I didn't enjoy it as much as the first one. I think in a sense, I think the writing is better in this movie than the first one. I think like you said, the story structure is there. They set things up and pay them off and give us a resolution, I think, and give us an explanation for things. I think a lot of the structure is much better. For me, it wasn't as fun as the first movie, which I know, like I said, it's a different tone, and I think that's fine. For me, I think this movie worked for me. I think it was fun. I think it was a little bit of a different take than the first one. I think they did a good job. For me, one of the big things was the pacing didn't feel right. Like, I had the same feeling as you. I was dubious when we started this movie, or when I started this movie. I was like, okay, we'll see where this goes. And then very quickly, I was like, oh, this seems like it's done pretty well. I'm engaged by the characters. Like you said, the setting. There's some humor. I want to see where this goes. I think it did a pretty good job at the setup. In the middle, it kind of dragged a bit for me. I'm not sure why. Maybe we can talk about that. But I feel like it could have just been tightened up through the middle. I thought the final act was fine. Once we get into, okay, we're going to deal with this problem, I thought that was fun. It paced very well. We get to see character development. For me, it was just the middle. And part of that, maybe they spent too much time on things that weren't as important, right? Because the first one, right? I think I was mentioning I wanted more backstory. They give us that here. Maybe they spent too much time on that or blending that with the characters or something. I don't know. Something didn't work for me in the middle parts of the story. I think it kind of went up and down. There are moments I was like, "Oh, this is really cool," and then it kind of dropped back down again. Yeah, that was my biggest complaint is pacing, I think. But maybe it ties into what you're saying with not being as invested in the character.
Yeah, maybe. Because you do raise a point that I did notice. So let me ask you some questions here.
Okay.
What is the historian's need?
The Danny DeVito character?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's the one character I
Besides
didn't.
surgery on his heart?
Right, that's the one character I didn't really
Right?
get. Like
Right.
his want was to go and see the house.
But what makes a good story is getting their needs fulfilled.
I'm glad you brought up him because he was the one character I was trying to figure out, like, how did he develop over the course of the story, right? What was his growth? Yeah.
But here's the thing. All of the characters had that same problem. You had to infer a lot. The priest, who we later find out is a con man, we don't find out he's a con man until 3/4 of the way through the story. We don't know his need as the story is progressing, and therefore we can't see the character arc. We don't know what the psychic's need is. She tells us her sisters make fun of her more than halfway through the story. We don't get Ben telling us what happened to Alyssa until more than halfway through the story. We infer something happened. I would say that was my biggest problem with this story, was that I think we should have seen exactly what these characters' needs were as soon as we met them. You know, with Ben, we got some backstory about how he met Alyssa and fell in love with her, etc. But then even like her ghost hunting thing, I mean, it was so thinly woven in. I would have liked to have seen it a little bit more richly woven in to, you know, he doesn't want to go to the mansion because it brings back memories of her. I mean, we didn't get any of that. We just got inference. Oh, and the reason he didn't want to go back to the mansion because he had the ghost camera and it made him a laughingstock amongst his people. It would have been, amongst his colleagues. It would have been much more interesting if he had been like, I don't want to go because it reminds me of her. Then we've got this deep emotional hook that we see the reluctance going in instead of just, I was a laughingstock when I came up with this camera. It was just sort of missed opportunities here with all these people that we didn't get to see them overcome. And the kid was, I don't know, there was just something about him. I think the director had the kid play this too seriously. This kid seemed generally traumatized, and I was thinking, this is a terrible movie for what is happening with this kid. And he had too many problems, right? His dad was dead, but he also wasn't liked in school, but he also had a ghost following him, but he also had an evil ghost trying to take his soul. This kid had too many problems to be solved. I think they should have just landed on one thing. He's depressed because his dad has passed. And left and then that everything else would have flowed from there, right? And then the evil ghost trying to get his soul, all of that plot line flows okay. But adding too many layers to this kid with all his little problems, I was just sort of like, this is just awful to watch the trauma that's happening to this kid.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay.
And I also felt like they gave more backstory and more time to the backstory to the evil Crump character than they did to our heroes. We know more about him than we know about our heroes. So I kind of felt like they weren't really an ensemble, just a bunch of people who came together. And this story would have been a lot stronger if it had an ensemble who learned to work together and then had their needs met. And that was a clearly laid out step by step.
Yeah, I think everything was set up for that. But you're right. They took too long in getting us there. And there's no reason that we couldn't have seen the need for each of those characters pretty much as soon as we met them.
Yes, absolutely.
Now that I'm thinking about each one of them, like, why not? Even the main character, with his, his wife dying or fiance, I forget if they actually got married. I don't remember. I think they were married, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's like, we don't even know what happened. We just have to infer, like you said, what happened. Because like we see them and then all of a sudden he's on his own moping around. And we're like, what? he could have explicitly said what happened there. Yeah, I think for all those characters, and you're right with the son, there was no reason for him to have so many things, right? Because we have so many other characters anyway. it would have made sense to just, okay, he's got one thing that he's dealing with, and each of the characters is one thing. So together, there's a bunch going on already. Yeah, maybe that's why it felt a
Yeah,
little
I bet
draggy in the
that's
middle because
exactly why. Because what was happening in the middle when you were worried about the pacing was all of the cathartic confessional stuff that should never have happened in the first place. It should simply have been revealed, shown not
yeah,
told, at the beginning of the story.
yeah, and that's right. And we would have been rooting for the characters
Yes.
more throughout the middle, and then the climax would have given us that chance to see, okay, are they going to succeed? Are they going to grow? And yeah, they do. But
Yeah,
you're right. It
exactly.
didn't come until way too late. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with everything you say.
And I would have actually liked to have seen that with the ghosts too. There's this indication that they're afraid of Crump. Was that his name? Crump?
Yeah, Alistair
Yeah, they're
Crump, I think.
afraid of Crump. But then they're like fighting for him. The trailer shows, remember all these ghosts that were coming after the priest and he was running around trying to distract them?
Yeah.
They were fighting for Crump. Why? What did they get out of it? Besides, what were the consequences for them? And why would they fight for him instead of against him when there's like 999 of them that could fight him? I think that could have been used as well. We could have had that little sort of B story of the ghosts' needs and their sort of growth. Didn't have to be too complicated. Just something really sort of subtle would have added even more layer and texture.
Yeah, or if he had some kind of power over them, seeing that power broken by some specific thing, and then they kind of wake up out of it and they're like, oh, we
Yeah.
don't have to follow this guy. It was kind of, again, you kind of have to infer or make up your
Yeah.
own reason for that, I guess.
And then I think at the end, because they started off with this really sort of amazing presentation of the overlap of life and death in New Orleans and how it is just part of life and accepted as part of life. It would have been great to have seen that at the end too. Some of the ghosts are still there. And we did see that, but the house interacting with them and the people interacting with them and accepting and acknowledging that this is part of life. Death is part of life. This existence is interwoven with the lives that they have now. And maybe I was so frustrated with it by that point, I missed it. And maybe I needed it to be a little bit more overt and not just people playing music on the balcony, because that doesn't tell me that they're interacting with the living characters.
Yeah, no, I agree. That would have been cool.
Any themes that you pulled from Haunted Mansion?
The theme I came up with was about grief, something like you don't have to deal with grief on your own, or accepting, you have to accept your grief and open yourself back up to others, rather, because both the main character and the son kind of shut themselves off because of the grief that they were feeling.
Yeah.
And they needed to accept that, and I think open themselves up to other people to be able to move on. So that was the theme I got.
That's great. That's a good one. I actually really struggled to find a theme for this one. Again, I was sort of frustrated with it, but I would pull the theme from the beginning, which is life and death are even interwoven, which isn't as good as yours.
I think they complement each other.
Yeah. So as a writer, what do you take away from Haunted Mansion?
Well, I take away the one thing I think they did better in this movie than the previous one, which is blending in of the backstory as the plot progressed.
Yeah.
We get snippets of what happened with the characters and why the situation is where it is as it was going. Although now, after our discussion, I think they didn't do that well, or they didn't do that as well with hero characters, right? The main characters. I think they did it well for the villain and the setup for the story, but not for the character development. Because I would have liked to have seen, like you said, having a better awareness of where those characters were starting emotionally and what their need was, what their flaws were right from the start, so that we could root for them. And that probably would have addressed a lot of the issue I had with the middle of the story. So that's my takeaway.
Nice. And my takeaway is just simply make sure characters' needs are clear at the beginning.
Yeah. What a shame. I think had they done that, it would have been really good.
Yeah, I agree.
And,
I agree. The
and
the the
our
framework was
discussion,
there.
yeah, our discussion has made me understand better, I think, what my issues were. Overall, I still like the movie. I still enjoyed it, but
Good.
I think it could have been so much better just with the
Yeah.
tweaks that you suggested.
Thank you for joining us as we talked about the story told in the movie Haunted Mansion. A huge thanks to our Patreon supporters and all our listeners. Your support, noticed through every like and every share, means the world to us. If you enjoyed today's themes, here are some further readings. Michael's Tales of Zara series was inspired by the Arabian mythology of 1001 Nights. Start with the Golden Scarab of Balahar, an enchanting quest that will captivate readers who love magic, wonder, and strong heroines. Links are in the show notes if you're curious to explore more. The Stories Told podcast is on all major platforms. Please like, subscribe, or follow to help us reach more story lovers like you. For book, TV, or movie suggestions, drop a line on our YouTube channel, and that link is in the notes too. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com. Join us next time as we talk about the story told in the television series Wednesday, Season 2, Episodes 1 through 4. Thanks so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.